So yeah. How hot is the coffee where you are? My name is Fred Indimuli. We are ready to kickstart your day.
Oh yes, in the music to Stanley Nyeringita. Leo Fred Nicole pata memo. Yeah, grey, white and black. And brown shoes. And also brown.
I can see you're learning well.
We got Fred taking all the credit. Anyway, welcome to your number one morning show. Right here, just debunking what is happening in the country and also globally, and taking a look at and also telling you what you should really know. And speaking of which, Fred, as we always do every single morning, telling you if you're just waking up right now, how the traffic is looking like right now. It's looking green, so well, that's good. A number of roads here, as you can see. Thika Road right there, and also a number of roads getting into Mombasa Road as well, that southern bypass. So this is Ngong Road as well, and also that particular stretch of Thika Road as well. Things are looking spick and span as of now. But then the weather, how the weather will be looking like right about now, it is 17 degrees Celsius, as you're saying, not trading, so probably light showers in different parts of the country, but Leonile Sikuna Kuambianga, look for your umbrella. Look for your umbrella, Fred, because it is about to, and it is going to be raining around in the noon, so from around 12 p.m., around 1 p.m. there, 24 degrees Celsius. Heavy rains, by the way, all the way until, 3 p.m. there-ish. So probably, maybe mvua inaweza some Kenyan timing.
All right.
And maybe come in the evening. But chances of it raining this particular day are quite high. We'll be getting back to my magic screen later on to take a look at the newspaper reviews.
But before that, we could just probably sweep through the main dailies and see what's the biggest talking point. On Taifa Leo, if we could start with that, ni enzi ya mpende msipende. That's a big headline on Taifa Leo this morning. Very interesting choice of wordplay there. And I think Taifa Leo does justice to some of these discussions we have.
Plus even the photo, the photos that they even decided to use.
Bas.
Oh, yes.
On the Daily Nation, they talk about murder, Mwangaza husband and sister quizzed. That's the Daily Nation today. And you can see we're struggling to have one uniform headline across dailies because that's the one on the Nation, Matters Meru. On the Star, state capture, Uhuru Matiang'i to be quizzed. Totally different discussion today.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And because we've been just talking about education. Now
and mostly the first 2 weeks of the year, it has been literally this one.
And for the first time this year, we are seeing different kind of headlines. And on the People Daily, Ruto has locked his doors for us, says CJ Kome. Something totally different as well.
All right.
And even on the Business Daily. On the Business Daily, we have how German firm bribed KRA officials to win software tender. Totally different headline. And so it means that there is so much to talk about today, big stories. Each daily decided to go in a different tangent. We'll be looking at that, plus what's headlining in the neighboring countries as well. But before that, let's take a look at the highlights this morning.
Oh, yes. And one particular story that I was expecting to see in a number of some of these papers is forms on our highlight this particular morning. And it really has to do with the whole Kenya-Tanzania KQ and senior government officials from both Kenya and Tanzania rush against time to avert a crisis following a decision by Tanzania to ban KQ passenger flights to Dar es Salaam.
Security managers at accommodation, lodging and hospitality establishments now directed to record and temporarily withhold identification documents of clients using the facilities to avoid rising crime.
And in matters sports, giants Cameroon and Algeria held to 1-all draws in the first matches at the ongoing AFCON tournament. Senegal, or the Lions of Teranga, registers dominance against Gambia. This is one of those moments, Fred, I tell you, I told you so. This is the team.
I agree that Senegal now appears to be a favorite. So far, that 3-0 win over Gambia is something to talk about. Meanwhile, Cameroon, 1-all with Guinea, and Algeria again, 1-all. against Angola. Very interesting turn of events. You saw before that Nigeria was held. I think Egypt too was held.
Yes.
So all the big guns so far not performing very well, apart from Ivory Coast and now Senegal. So yes, something to look forward to. Let's take a look at our top story this morning. Now, top government officials are now racing against time to avert a crisis following Tanzania's decision to ban Kenya Airways passenger flights to Dar es Salaam in a reciprocity dispute. Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi, who doubles up as a CS in charge of foreign affairs, took to Twitter last night to assure Kenyans that he had communicated with his counterpart in Tanzania and that they had agreed to resolve the matter. Tanzania's Foreign Affairs Minister, January Makamba, acknowledged that he had indeed talked to Mudavadi and that the two had agreed to settle the dispute within 3 days. Now, the Tanzanian Civil Aviation Authority has banned flights between Nairobi and Dar es Salaam effective January 22nd this year. The decision comes after Kenya's aeronautical authorities declined a request from Tanzania for all cargo flights by Air Tanzania Company Limited. In an official statement on Monday, Hamza Johari, the Director General of the Tanzania Civil Aviation Authority, clarified that the ban applies to passenger flights operated by KQ under 3rd and 4th Freedom traffic rights.
Right, let's take a look at the news diary this morning. First off, itinerary by the President William Ruto, who has been in a number of regions across the country. So today he is scheduled to visit Nandi County for development tour. I'll be giving you more updates on that. Remember, he's been launching the affordable housing projects, among other projects. Speaking of itinerary, Azimio leader Raila Odinga will continue with his Western and Nyanza tour today. Raila is expected to hold a delegates meeting in Gisambi and thereafter proceed to Mbale town and later Muhaya. And still on the whole Western region, ODM party grassroots recruitment is expected to take place in Vihiga today. The exercise will continue in the Western region this week and later proceed to the Coast region next week. And speaking of matters parties, as we flip our diary with you, Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka is expected to lead the party's Special National Executive Council, or if you prefer, NEC, or rather NEC, meeting at the party's headquarters around noon today. We'll be giving you more on that in subsequent bulletins. Also today, we'll be having Kenyan University, the FIDA Kenya and university student leaders will be holding a press briefing to address their concern on the rising cases of femicide for this year alone as well. Let's take a look at the whole AFCON diary even before we get into the dailies this morning. Director Kevo was really itching to kutuonyesha the new bumper.
Okay. Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
We're still waiting for the bumper.
The new bumper. But then it's important to also take a look at this AFCON diary. Today, Burkina Faso will be playing against Mauritania. Depends on where you went to school.
Every day you learn.
Oh,
Mauritania?
Yes.
Okay.
Mauritania, Mauritania. Tunisia will be playing Namibia, and Mali will be facing head-on with South Africa today. Those are the games to be played in AFCON. Let's take a look at the dailies this morning.
Right, and so this morning we kick off with the Daily Nation. The big headline comes from Meru. Murder, Mwangaza husband and sister quizzed. That's a big headline on the Daily Nation. And probe, Meru Governor Kawira Mwangaza's husband and sister are the latest members of her family to be targeted for questioning over the brutal killing of blogger Daniel Muthiani, aka Sniper. This story has been going on for weeks now, and it is a developing story. Governor's brother is also being held by detectives alongside 8 other suspects. That's a big headline on the front page of the Daily Nation this morning. Other news making it to the front page: stretched facilities as Form 1s report, and a photo there of Form 1s in one school. A very long queue at the Mangina High School in Mombasa County yesterday as Form 1s are reported for their first day in school. Other highlights on the front page of the Daily Nation: we are ready for dialogue, CJ Kome now tells Ruto. Elsewhere, Tanzania blocks KQ passenger flights to Dar. And finally, in sports, Salah saves Egypt as Ghana failed to Cape Verde. And so, yes, more or less what we've covered in our top stories. That is what is featuring on the front page of the Daily Nation today. And that's it.
All right, and let's cross over to Taifa Leo. This morning I told you I'll be back to my magic screen right here. Take a look at other papers on right here. We do have Taifa Leo. Ni enzi ya mpende msipende katika mazingira ambapo kauli ya rais hakuwa kama sheria maamuzi ya mahakama yanayokosoa miradi ya serikali yanapuuzwa na yeyote mwenye kuwasilisha kesi dhidi ya serikali kotini kusitishwa. Nchi iko katika hatari ya kutumbukia katika uongozi wa kimya. Gazeti la Taifa hilo. Taarifa nyingine ya kushangaza: Salasia alaumu shetani kwa hasira zake. Asema ajutia hasira zake za hivi karibuni ambazo zimempa sifa mbaya machoni pa umma. Asema shetani, wewe ulinifanya nitende haya.
Shetani ashindwe.
Shetani ashindwe. Bwana asifiwe. Amen. Vidokezo vingine katika gazeti hili: Mandago adaiwa kutishia mashahidi. Pale chini kwingineko ni msoto mtupo, shule zikisajili kidato cha kwanza. Kufikia sasa shule bado hazijapokea mgao wa serikali na CDF na madeni ni mengi. Ukurasa wa 3. Pale Juma, swala ya mahakama, Kome sasa ataka kuongea na Rais Ruto. Asema mashambulio dhidi ya idara ya mahakama yanatisha majaji. Mengi ni katika ukurasa wa 3 au wa 2, kunradhi. Masuala ya michezo: AFCON, pressure Misri, Nigeria na Ghana zikiteleza. Nigeria na Misri waliambulia sare Ghana wakilala mechi ya ufunguzi, katika ukurasa wa 20. But then still on this magic screen, Fred, we do have the Business Daily as well. And on this Business Daily, as we had taken a look at earlier, the top story is how German firm bribed KRA officials to win software tender. And a context on this really goes to show how kickbacks channeled through Zimbabwe company and SAP sided to, I can't really see
improperly access contract documents.
Oh yes, to improperly access contract documents. On the left side of this sticker, spirits imports decline as higher taxes hit demand. The bits there on the Business Daily. Just trying to see, and right. Rubies wins 7.7 billion. Kenya Power Fuel Supply deal, and shilling falls to new low of 160.23 to dollar. At the very top scroll of that Business Daily, making a living from art is on the Life Pullout magazine on page 19, from BD to PD.
All right. People Daily: Ruto has locked his doors for us, says CJ Kome. That's a big headline on the People Daily. Top judiciary organ, that's the JSC, warns that declaration by President Ruto that he would no longer obey orders by judges was untenable, amounts to contempt of court, and if allowed unabated, can lead to civil strife. That story is on page 4. Yes, and I watched this press briefing yesterday live on TV47. It is going to make one of those big conversations today as well. That story from Meru also features on the front page of the People Daily. Mwangaza's husband quizzed over blogger's brutal murder. It is on the right-hand strip. Meru governor's brother, county director of protocol, and 4 others in custody. The other story making it to the front page comes from that cabinet meeting yesterday. Kenya adopts Treasury single account ahead of 109 billion shilling loan from the IMF. And the president says that up until now, there have been so many accounts held by different government departments. And so all this money is in different bank accounts. Some people in government are even making profit from the interest just by banking this money separately. And now the cabinet has decided that everything will be in one single account. Remember already the payment mode is one. There's one pay bill number for government.
Yes.
And now all this money going to one government account, Treasury single account. Interesting times. We are waiting to see how this will work. Also on the front page, and this one we highlighted in our top stories, new tough regulations for access to vacation rentals. This emanates from the sad stories of two young Kenyan girls who've been killed over the last 2 weeks in business accommodation. Let's call it
short-term.
Because a short-term accommodation, because people have been dubbing it something else. Short-term accommodation, and so yes, Private Securities Authority released these regulations yesterday. So security managers there will now demand for your identification documents, and they've been allowed to withhold the documents as well. How this will affect business is something that we'll wait to see as well.
Let's take a look at the Standard. We hadn't really gone through it earlier on. So the front page of the Standard, well, it focuses on the same story that you're taking a look at from People Daily on matters, the judges really, and CJ to Ruto, do not lead us to anarchy. Matters tough talk there. Justice Martha Koome has warned the president and his allies that undermining the judiciary is an assault to democracy and will only take the country down on the path of chaos and lawlessness. That is on page 7. And just a quote by the Chief Justice: these threats and declarations are extremely serious and a monumental assault to the Constitution, rule of law, and the very stability of the nation, and can lead to chaos. That is the front page of the big story of the Standard. Another story I haven't seen in other dailies, though, really has to do with the Mount Kenya wars, and it is on the left scroll of the Standard. Gachagwa's Mount Kenya wars deepen. Is on page 8. The touting of Kiharu MP as region supremo has split opinion and given DP a new headache as he seeks to be a Central's kingpin. And just below that, we do have DPP lawyers clash in Mandago trial. And DPP has denied claims that Uasin Gishu senator is interfering with witnesses in Finland scholarship case. Matters business, farm to pay 35 billion on carrier bribery case. And at the very bottom scroll there, as you can see, that photo of a rider ferrying a parent and a student along Kisii-Keroka Highway to join Form 1 yesterday. They say it is a journey of 1,000 miles. They quote a number there, 1.4 million. So this is the number of students who are expected to join Form 1 this week, and schools have already reported congestion since there was no investment in infrastructure to accommodate all. Let's go to the top scroll of this paper. Pensioners 30-year vain wait for 74,000 Kenyan shillings. That is on page 3. In world news, Israel ignored intelligence on Hamas raid. And in the Financial Standard, Ruto eyes diaspora dollars in jobs gamble. And in matters AFCON, Black Stars lose a shine after AFCON loss. That is on page 40, the back page basically. There's a day of shocks as Ghana's Black Stars left wounded. Right. Nyota yao ilipotea.
Ndio hali kule. Let's take a look at the Star. Very interesting headline here. I don't know how to describe it. State capture, that phrase that we've heard over and over again. State capture, Uhuru Matiang'i to be quizzed. And this is where the problem comes in. Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah preparing State Capture Commission bill. Remember, this was a promise they said this would happen. And they would have this commission within 30 days.
Oh, yes.
It is exactly 490 days later. And this is when they're talking about preparing the bill. Well, let's just say we'll believe it once we see it. They say Kenyatta and a host of other his senior state officials will be key witnesses in that. Well, we'll wait and see. Once that commission is in place, then you can have this discussion. But it is the big headline on the Star this morning. Other stories given prominence there, and this will make a very interesting read. Inside President Ruto's big changes at State House. Yes, that's 795 million shilling renovation. You know how much that money can do? You know how many buildings 795 million shillings can put up? Even in Nairobi. Oh, this is interesting. Elsewhere, Kenya's Eurobond headache as buyback strategy falters. And this is a story I want to look at properly. Because we've been told that the debt was settled, or rather, at least payment was made in December, and that we are back on track in servicing our debt. But now, this headline says that the Eurobond headache is still there as buyback strategy falters. There are those who warn that we are in deep trouble this year. So yes, I think some of the highlights on the Star are really captivating today.
Oh yes, which reminds me, I think as of yesterday, Uganda and Tanzania were probably listed as, having one of the fastest growing economies, Kenya being left out, and now raising questions. But then, I think that is acute to VUCA border. And interestingly enough, this morning, away from the whole usual Uganda, Tanzania papers, today we took a look at what is happening in Rwanda for the first time. Be taking a look at the front page of the Rwanda. It is the New Times. They have it from simple crop to cash cow, how avocado became profitable. That is the top story is what is happening. Matters avocado is making it to the front page of Rwanda.
Yeah, avocado is big news in Rwanda this morning.
Yes.
Makes it to the big headline.
Oh, yes.
Interesting.
They say seedlings that Rwanda imported cost about $4.5 each. That's approximately 5,000 Rwandan francs. More is on page 4.
Okay.
Yes, another bit there. Amahoro National Stadium engineers, quote unquote, committed to deliver before August. They have it an inside view of Rwanda's revamped Amahoro National Stadium as of the 11th of January. Is about, this is just one of among the key highlights. But then there's a very interesting story that really even affects Kenya, because I mean it is in the East African Community bloc, really. There is an op-ed here on page 6. It says, what's it with East Africans?
It reminds me of that headline on the East African today, this week.
This week, basically.
The edition this week talking about the anomie, the season of anomie.
Oh, yes.
Because there's so many issues between so many different EAC members. And it draws me now to the headline on the papers in Tanzania today.
Oh, yes. And interestingly enough, even as you cross over, even that particular bit on the East African was also taking a look at Somalia. Somalia is the newest member, seated into the EAC bloc as of last year, November, 24th November. And even the newest member is, in this whole mix of, wars and all that.
There's a lot of unrest, a lot of tiffs happening around the region. And it's what features on the front page of the Citizen in Tanzania, tit for tat. As Tanzania bans Kenya Airways Dar flights, that's a big headline on the Citizen, meaning it is big news even for them.
Oh, yes.
Tanzania has banned Kenya Airways from operating flights between Dar and Nairobi with effect from January 22nd after Kenyan authorities rejected Tanzania's request for all cargo flight operations by ATCL. That's a big headline on the front page of the Citizen. Let's take a look at Mwananchi, which is a sister paper. It also makes mention of the same, yes, on this red ticker here. Tanzania, Kenya katika vita vipya, KQ marufuku. So that story, yes, still big in Tanzania. The big headline on the Mwananchi is something different. Uteuzi wa kimkakati. Daktari Nchimbi rasmi akalia kiti cha Chongolo. Ni turufu uchaguzi wa serikali za mitaa, bla bla bla, but Tanzania, Kenya katika vita vipya, KQ.
Interestingly enough, though, as I was alluding earlier, I was expecting to see even a mention on the same story in any of these highlights, but I haven't really seen.
For Kenya, I don't think we've given it prominence anyway.
Oh, yes.
It's not on any, or apart from a slight mention as a highlight on the front page of the Daily Nation. Tanzania blocks KQ passenger flights to Dar, but the story is on page 3. Yes. All right, that's as far as Tanzanian papers are concerned.
Oh, yes.
What about Uganda?
Let's go to Uganda now and see what is happening there. Yes, I was waiting for my magic screen to appear. Daily Monitor, NAM, the whole conference that they were washing the Ugandan roads yesterday for. This is a big story in Uganda this particular morning. The whole non-aligned movement conference saying the globe is going to Uganda for this particular bid. And they have a photo there of a couple of world leaders for yesterday's first day of the non-aligned movement summit in Kampala. Other stories making it to this paper, at the very top, a G report busts bubble on coffee projects. And at the very bottom there, lawyers petition ULS on judiciary independence. Well, seems as if also matters judiciary independence is making big news in Uganda.
All right. But the non-aligned movement summit is still going on. And I think that's a focus in Uganda today. Let's come back home and take a look at the cartoons. And we start off with the Daily Nation. On page 15 of the Daily Nation, this cartoon by Victor Ndula talks about the dollar, the Kenya shilling vis-a-vis the dollar, and the journey it has traveled from the days when it was at 120 shillings, 140, 154, and now unprecedented, a record, 160 shillings to the dollar and counting. And yes, two gentlemen there holding the shilling on its journey towards, as the shilling is really struggling. Yes, and yes, my director tells me the shilling is almost fainting.
I mean,
I think it's
sweating.
fainted.
It's sweating profusely.
This one is heading to ICU. 160 shillings to the dollar, and the shilling has been carried there as it struggles by the two gentlemen who lead this nation. That's the president and his deputy. A caricature there. Page 16 of the Standard.
Oh, yes. A man wearing, donning a purple...
a caricature that looks very much like the former governor of Kakamega, Wycliffe Oparanya, saying that he's now realized that Dr. Khalwale is a gentleman.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Western Kenya politics is very interesting sometimes.
Oh, yes. But then in his mind, he's thinking of the Soforia written My Interests.
Yes.
And he's, the
irony is he supported Fernandes Baraza, who's the current governor, who's yet even to finish his first term. This same Mr. Oparanya. And now he's realizing that Dr. Khalwale, who's gunning for that same seat come 2027, is a gentleman.
Oh, yes. Earlier on, you had asked about the whole 795 million shillings to be, revamping State House, 100 and plus State House. And Stano goes for that this particular morning. And I mean, he actually asks the same questions that this is on page 10, kama kawaida, on page 10 of People Daily. He is asking the same question you're asking. Do you know how much this can be used, if it was to be allocated elsewhere?
Yeah. And
he has two contrasting. So a gentleman there, holding the front page probably of People Daily, and it says State House upgrade to cost taxpayers 795 million shillings. And contrasting there, look, no doctors, medicine, water, oxygen, salaries. And he's pointing to a local public hospital. There's a long queue of people. The two contrasting images there.
Yes, that's Stano's take on the situation in Kenya. We'll be looking at some of these discussions with my panelists after the break. On State of the Nation, today we're hoping to host John Chikati, MP Tongaren, Alex Moore, the political analyst, Maina Karobia, MP East Africa Legislative Assembly, and Ruth Ambogo, who is a lawyer and governance expert, as we look at the state of the nation. And some of the discussions we'll be having will be on education, the judiciary versus executive, also the regional tiffs that we've seen on some of the headlines, including in Tanzania, that Kenya-Tanzania tiff over KQ flights and how this plays in the region. So do stand by for this. Of course, you can be part of the conversation as well through our social media pages on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. Later on, we'll be hosting the PS.
The PS, yes. Hassan Abubakar just talking about how we can really tap into matters investment, and also taking a look at the special economic zones that, the Kenya Kwanza government has really been trying to revive. I mean, the public, special economic zones as well as the private. How even for the common mwananchi, do they really have to have this conversation? This is coming up on the 8 a.m. clock when we talk about matters business every single Tuesday. Stick around for that. Our social media handles 22047 at TV47 News on X, TV47 KE on Facebook, and Ringita_ on X.
At Freddy Ndamuli on X. You're watching Morning Cafe. Panelists this morning. Good morning, welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Ndimuli. We want to get down to the discussions of the day with my panelists, the ones you've just seen on the screen. Beginning on my immediate left, Ruth Ambogo, a lawyer and governance expert. It is a pleasure to host you on TV 47 for the very first time.
Well, not really the first time on your show.
Me hosting you.
Yes.
It is a pleasure to host you for the very first time. Karibu sana. Next to Ruth, we have John Chikati, MP Tongaren, also the Secretary General for Kenya. It is also the very first time that I'm getting to host.
Yes, and thank you so much.
Karibu sana. It's good to have you in studio.
Yeah.
A familiar face on this panel, Bwana Alex Muathi, political analyst. Happy New Year, karibu sana.
Happy New Year, and always a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Karibu sana.
Yeah.
Last but definitely not least, also the very first time that I'm getting to host this gentleman, Bwana Maina Karobia, MP, East Africa Legislative Assembly. Karibu sana. It is a pleasure to have you in studio. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot we can talk about. I want us to talk about the judiciary versus the executive. Also this tiff that we are now seeing between Kenya and Tanzania and other issues affecting the region. But before we get down to that, there's an issue that has been on the headlines for the past 2 weeks, and this has to do with education. Last week on Monday, the KCSE 2023 exam results were released, and after that we've seen back to school activity pick up. Yesterday, the Form 1s joined secondary schools countrywide. That process will continue for the rest of this week. Also, the second cohort of the JSS just joined junior secondary schools this week as well. Now, there are quite a number of challenges which featured on the headlines yesterday, matters to do with funding for education especially, and I want us to look at that. We know that the country is in dire straits. There's no money. There are issues of liquidity. Treasury has said over and over that there is no money. Capitation to schools is yet to be disbursed. The CS for Education and the PS had already told Parliament that even the required 22,000 shillings capitation per child is not tenable this time around. They'll only release about 16,000 capitation per child against a demand of about 30,000 from the schools. We're also seeing the issues happening with the JSS and the transition to CBC, where teachers have done their tools, saying that their contracts were not renewed as had been promised. Also, the mishandling of the curriculum, as they describe it. And the question we've been asking, what is ailing our education sector? Is it the funding model, or is it lack of prioritization from the administration that is with us currently? Let's start with you, Ruth.
First of all, I'll begin by underscoring the importance of education in a nation. The fact that education is a key component of growth and development. It is through education that skills are impacted on our children, and they end up now, joining the job market and contributing towards the growth and development of the country. And therefore, if not prioritized, and for me that is the main issue, if not prioritized, if not given the importance and relevance that it deserves, then education suffers. And once education suffers, the education sector suffers, you find an array of problems and challenges that the children are the ones who at the end of the day become the ultimate, how do I put it? They become the ultimate people who suffer the consequences of not prioritizing education.
More or less collateral damage.
They become collateral damage, so to say. I mean, when you do not prioritize education, especially when for you as an administration, it is not a key component. It doesn't even feature within your top conversations. At every other time, when the leadership stands up to speak at political rallies, because you see, we still have political rallies. Unfortunately, we still do have political rallies. During political rallies, it doesn't even come up as a statement. Mm-hmm. It just comes to show you how important, or the level at which this education has been placed within an administration. I'd give an example of the Kibaki administration and the relevance that he put on education. The fact that he saw education as the next tool that would drive the country forward. And in most of his policies, you'd see education featuring very highly. You know, he was thinking of how we could have education as free as possible for everybody. Some of us actually went to high school during his time. And during his time, we actually had things very easy. But now you're looking at a time where parents have to bear the burden of paying school fees, as you have mentioned. Treasury is mentioning that they do not have enough money. But then the question becomes that, why don't we have enough money to facilitate a sector such as important as this? Okay. When you look at the spending priorities of the government and compare them to what is important to us, then there's a big disconnect in the sense that right now, look at the reports that were released of about how much State House spends within a period of 3 months. There was a report that was released towards the end of last year of the expenditure that State House had spent between July and September, a very short period of time where State House had spent about 8.2 million shillings on domestic travel, about 6 million shillings on international travel, and a whooping 2.2 billion shillings in general, you know. So you ask yourself, why are we prioritizing expenditure on things that do not really add value and devaluing one of the most important sectors that will drive the nation's growth? And you know, when we talk about even the job market, when we are talking about exporting, you know, trying to export talent, as the president seems to be focusing on exporting talent, which talent will you export if you are not giving attention to education? Because you cannot export an uneducated talent to the countries that you're striking deals with in terms of getting jobs, you know, exporting talent to them.
And let's look at the budgeting, because Bwana Chikati, through the budget, education gets perhaps the biggest chunk, the biggest allocation.
Yes.
Hence, the justification would be education takes most of the money. You cannot say we're not prioritizing education. Is it therefore an issue of funding that we're now struggling to sustain learners in schools? Because capitation to schools, disbursement to schools, Treasury says we are struggling to pay schools. Is it an issue of the funding model? Because there are those who even say that this obsession with bursaries through CDF, through the governor's bursary kitty, through the president's bursary kitty, is what is part of the problem, that probably Treasury should just consolidate all this money and enable it to pay for education, and or rather boost its capitation kitty across board. Probably that would lessen the burden as opposed to dividing it and spreading money across, especially through politicians. Do you think that is part of the problem?
Yes, it is. And more specifically, to understand it better, education is diversified because part of it is being implemented by the national government and part of it is being implemented by the county government. For example, the ECDs and also the VETs, the vocational training centers. The primary schools up to university and other tertiary institutions are being implemented by the national government. Now, all these require money. Now, one of the biggest challenges has been to plan ahead, okay? The policies are good. The planning in terms of delivery of the finances has been the problem. For example, we knew very well that there is going to be the JSS. And the problem was that the JSS started before the infrastructure came in, okay? So that has been a challenge. Now we are having the second lot of the JSS joining this year, and yet we do not have classes. That issue we've been able to raise it. Secondly, the issue that we've been raising is, for example, when you look at the bursary disbursements, bursaries come very late. For example, they come at the end of the term. And the moment you pay bursary at the end of the term, is you are paying for a student who has not been attending classes. Because as I say always, there is nowhere the principals and the heads of schools can get money to run their schools. And therefore they depend on fees. Now the government sometimes back came up with a policy of contributing in terms of fees of these students. Now, that has not been forthcoming. Now, if you look carefully at the results of the recent results, you will find that 50% of the students got D's and E's, okay? Part of that is attributed to absence in classes. Are you seeing? To absence in classes. And that absence is related to lack of fees, okay? And so then that. Number two, there is something which is very unique that happened, that of the students that entered Form 1 in 2020 and came out in 2023, 175 students never appeared in Form 4. Now, the analysis should be commissioned by the minister to determine where 175,000 are so many people. Where did they go? Did they reach on the way because of pregnancy? How many died? Where are the rest? So that can they, if they were pregnant, can they go back to school? These are the questions we are asking. So the goodwill is there, the national goodwill is there. The implementation has been a bit difficult. Okay. Yes.
Bwana, there seems to be a lot of confusion, especially in the handling of this sector. And one may wonder, and there are those who already say that probably it is the kind of approach that this administration has on matters to do with education. If you may draw comparisons between this administration's handling of education and previous administrations, President Mwai Kibaki was probably very forthright even during his campaign about free primary education. It is his biggest promise, and he delivered within the 7 days of him taking over. President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Jubilee administration, of which William Ruto was part of, came up with a promise of free laptops. Remember, and free secondary education. And they really took time and energy to try and deliver that. And to a huge extent, or to some extent, they were successful. But we seem to be struggling to identify or to point out the kind of promise that Kenya Kwanza administration made in as far as education. So even asking, have they delivered or not, we are a bit lost. What is your assessment of this?
First of all, let me reemphasize what the lady panelists have said, that education is an equalizer. A young boy who was raised up in Kama village of Loitoktok went through primary school in Loitoktok, secondary school in Loitoktok. Systems were better, so that after Form 4, he went to Nyeri High School because he performed well in Form 4. And after that, then he was able to go to the university. At the university, there was what you used to call the education was paid by the government. And then we used to get, I'm talking about this young man seated here, and we used to get allowances that we used to call boom. That was enough to be able to sustain you in Nairobi, in the university, and also pay school fees for your siblings if you had to do that. Because of that, we are where we are. Because once you become an engineer, then you're able to take care of yourself and take care of other things. So meaning that education is critical in a nation. A nation that does not consider education critical is a dying nation. Once education becomes a business in a nation, that nation is in trouble. And I think it's important that we have a member of parliament here, that they must, in the legislative discussions, take it as serious as it should be. Because over the various regimes that have come in this country, except the Kibaki regime, and this cannot be hidden, except Kibaki regime, there's no other regime that has been serious about it. They have talked about education, but they have not been serious about it. Fred, today, no one, it's not rocket science, that education should be free. All these bursaries, all these CDF things should be done away with. The government must identify the number of students we have. Prioritize education for the benefit of the future of this country, not for their own benefit, because the CDFs, the bursaries you see them doing, is what the members of parliament use to gain advantage of their competitors during the next election. So that you find sometimes somebody is praised up because he gave a lot of bursaries. But what do they give? If you ask the MP sitting next to me, is that the fee is 25,000, they give a child 3,000.
Yeah.
It doesn't help, but accept his name, the selfishness that comes with the ones who want to use it for that purpose. I'm not saying all of them are like that. Some of them wish they could have more money to give. But they should go back to Parliament and make it a law to make education free and available to every child in this country.
It is already in the Constitution.
It is not
right.
free. It's not in the Constitution.
The fact that education is guaranteed as a right?
A law. You know, there are things are in the Constitution that need a law that implements them. It should not be a government's decision to make it free or not. It should be a law demanding that primary ECD, primary, secondary should be free. When somebody goes to university, there's a different cut of fish. But in that, fund everyone. Stop this nonsense of saying that they are vulnerable, I don't know. There are 5 categories, I think. Vulnerable, less needy. Every child is a Kenyan child. Give them everything that they have, that is available. But give them in terms of loans so that when they get to work...
You're talking about university education now.
University education. So the issue is the prioritization of education. And I wish that our leaders would realize that it's the only thing that allows a child from Kapenguria, a child from Lodwa, a child from Siaya to come up and be a national leader in this country.
Let's get Bwana Karobia's assessment of this just before we go on a break. What is your assessment of the handling of the education sector by this administration?
Fred, allow me to look at it on a positive note. 30% of our national budget is actually dedicated to the education sector. And I want to commend Mheshimiwa Chikati here, because this is a budget that they passed. And I think for the first time, this administration is actually prioritizing the education sector. If you look at the number of teachers that were employed last year, for the first time in a single recruitment exercise, we employed close to 56,000 teachers. I think there is no better prioritization of education than that. Fred, I have to say that I'm a teacher by profession with a TSC number. So this is an area that I'm very passionate about. And the issue that we were taught in class to be very sensitive to a student is when you compare the ratio of a teacher to the student. How many students is a teacher handling? And I think with the recruitment exercise that we saw last year, it is something that I know it is going to reduce the ratio. And in terms of also the funding, I think this is something that we need to commend this government. But with the challenges that have been highlighted in this discussion, I know these are things that can be improved. As a practitioner or somebody who is passionate of this sector, I also believe it is important that we consolidate all these funds so that we remove the politics, we remove the gains from the person issuing the fund, so that now we prioritize the education from the point of we want to see the success of the whole sector. I don't find the need, like last week, let me give you the scenario of my area. Last week, but when I saw the governor issuing bursaries, this week the MP is also issuing bursaries. And you ask yourself, maybe there is a student or there is a people who is needy, who is going to miss in all those bursaries, and somebody who is who has means in one or the other is going to get bursaries from both leaders. So I think we need to identify a working mechanism where these resources or this financing model can be appropriated to people who really need the resources. But in terms of this administration handling the education sector, I think I would give them a good score, because the funding, the recruitment, it's well in place. The working party committee that was appointed by the government or by the president, you remember in the previous administration, people seemed not to understand how the CBC is going to work. In fact, I can remember this administration, when it was campaigning, there was some leaders within the coalition who are actually saying that once we win power, we are going to remove the CBC altogether, or we are going to revert to the 844. But I think when when the Kenya Kwanza administration came to power, they realized there is need also to listen or to look at the greater good and to look into the future where we are heading as a humanity and also as a nation. Okay. That's why you find the Working Party was brought on board to identify a more working mechanism. And I think the recommendations that were brought on board, they are things that we can work with.
Okay, time now for us to take a break and come back to take a look at other discussions, in particular that tiff between Kenya and Tanzania over the banning of KQ flights to Dar es Salaam. And we look at how this will impact the region. That after the break. You're watching Morning Cafe. Remember, you can be part of this conversation on our social media pages as well, on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. With me, Fred Ndimuli, and I'm still in studio with Ruth Ambogo, Bonachikati, Alex Mwathi, and Karobia MP East Africa Legislative Assembly. We now want to look at something that is cross-border, beyond just Kenya alone. And I'm struggling to find this story on the front pages of our dailies. It's only captured as a highlight on the front page of the Daily Nation. Tanzania blocks KQ passenger flights to Dar. The story is on page 3 of the Daily Nation. And it's not a very big story either way. Paul Were has written this story, top strip, about 150 words, on page 3 of the Daily Nation. But if you look at the Tanzanian papers this morning, the Citizen, for example, this is a Tanzanian paper, Tit for Tata, and if my director can assist me with this, the front page of the Citizen. Tit for Tata's Tanzania bans Kenya Airways Dar flights. Yes, that's a headline in Tanzania. It's big news there. It is not something to joke around with. Tanzania has banned Kenya Airways from operating flights between Dar es Salaam and Nairobi with effect from January 22nd after Kenyan authorities rejected Tanzania's request for all cargo flight operations by ATCL. It is important to note that Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi, who's also in charge of foreign affairs, tweeted last night that he had been in talks with his counterpart in Tanzania, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, January Makamba, and that they have agreed to resolve this dispute within 3 days. Whether or not they'll be successful, you have to wait and see. It reminds me of another headline that is on this week's edition of the East African. season of anomie. This week's East African has this headline, season of anomie. Things are falling apart in EAC. Burundi shut its border with Rwanda in spite of rebel attacks, just as DRC did over M23. Meanwhile, Somalia beats drums of war in Port Rao with Addis as Kenya and Uganda square it off at regional court over oil imports. Now, it is a time, and I'm directing this to the MP from the East Africa Legislative Assembly. It is a time when we're struggling for East Africa integration. We are really hoping that something will come out of it. Yet we are seeing that more and more we are getting into trouble, especially Kenya, that has previously played the big brother role in this region, coming from last year, Jamhuri Day, and questions were asked why most of those leaders did not come to Kenya, did not attend our 60th Independence Day anniversary. If we could compare it with what happened last week in Zanzibar, their 60th day anniversary, 60th Independence Day anniversary, enough leaders from the region made it there. And Kenya could only send the deputy president. Our president did not attend that. And one may wonder, is Kenya getting a bit too arrogant in its relationship with our sisters and brothers in the region? Let's start from there.
Yes, allow me to say that we have a project of East Africa, and this project is not actually didn't begin with our generation. Actually, it began with our forebearers, the founding fathers of our respective nations. That dream or that vision actually collapsed along the way. Then it was revived in the late 1990s, and we are here. But allow me to say that the biggest challenge in East Africa, and it is from my observation in the last 1 year, is that people are not going to the table with an open heart and with an open book. Nations are facing each other, but they still have their hidden agenda on the table. And I will say that because it's not only Kenya that is getting challenges with its neighbors. Last week, Burundi closed its borders on Rwanda. For the last 2 months, you have had challenges between the president of DR Congo with the president of Rwanda. So, and in the past we have had Tanzania having issues with Rwanda, Uganda having issues with its neighboring countries also. Allow me to say, the reason as to why we are having these challenges is because nations are not genuine, they are not honest with each other. And they need to realize they cannot develop by closing their borders. They cannot develop in 21st century. You cannot develop when you are just looking inward. You need to open your borders. This is a century where visas have been removed and all manner of bureaucracies that have been placed for people not to interact. I think what I've realized the last 1 year in EAC, actually people are not putting the money where their mouth is. I remember last month, I moved a motion in the East Africa Legislative Assembly, 2 months ago, not last month, 2 months ago. And that motion actually was deferred 3 times. And the reason as to why it was deferred is because the officers that are supposed to be working in a parliamentary setup, I know Mheshimiwa Chikati knows, they are the ones, they have to call their capitals to consult because their nations have not been complying with the financial obligation as stipulated by the Treaty of Establishment of East Africa. They have to consult with their capitals in regards to whether this discussion can continue. Huh? So, and let me say that when that motion was brought on board, or when I brought it on board and the discussion there was pull and push in the discussion, $8 million was brought, and now the motion was now brought on to Parliament for discussion.
Where does this leave the future of East African integration, now that you're saying that there could be some sabotage from some states?
So for me, where I'm looking at it, we have 4 pillars of that guide our integration. Number 1, custom union. Number 2, common market. Number 3, monetary union. And number 4, political federation. So far, at least, we have been able to come up with laws or make laws and policies that align the two first policies, that is custom union and common market. We are now on monetary union. Let me shock you, my good panelist. We were supposed, by 2024, we were supposed to achieve the monetary union aspect. And that was envisioned in 2013. But do you know, when we neared this 2024, they have deferred it to 2031.
Okay.
So people are pushing forward achievement of some of these strategic and key aspects that guide our integration process. But Fred, before you go to Ruth, I have to report that we are on the issue of political federation. We are doing constitutional consultations so that we make a draft constitution that now is going to ensure that we achieve political federation. And Senator Amos Wako, the former senator of Busia, is the vice chair of the technical committee that is handling that particular document.
Okay. But coming back to Kenya and how we are acting with our neighbors,
yes.
We are, in recent weeks, we've seen South Sudan recall its ambassador to Kenya. We've seen the DRC also recall its ambassador to Kenya. We've seen Uganda take Kenya to the East Africa Court of Justice. Now we are seeing Tanzania banning flights to KQ flights to Dar es Salaam. Surely something, there's a pattern here.
There is a pattern.
That says something about how Kenya is acting. Probably that big brother role, probably some sense of arrogance.
Let's say it as it is. It doesn't really show how Kenya is acting. It shows how Kenya's leader is acting, because it is through the interaction of these leaders that we get to have an establishment of the East African community. And as you put it before, you asked the question that are we experiencing a situation where there is too much arrogance coming from our country? And the answer is absolutely yes. We have a leader who seemingly wants to appear as if he is the one to call the shots, who seemingly wants to appear as if I am speaking on behalf of everybody else, forgetting that these are independent countries that have their own ways of doing things, that in as much as we are in a union, a coalition that is supposed to push us towards a common agenda, people have individual leaders, they have individual ways of doing things, and that respect is paramount if our integration is to work. And I think when he does this, he really does not foresee how important regional unity is, because regional unity is one of the ways through which you bargain. Bargaining as a strong force. It is one of the ways through which you come together as a strong force and bargain for the benefit of your community, of your communities and your region. So when you start downplaying the importance of regional unity, when asked questions about why no one attended your Jamhuri Day celebrations, you say, I also do not attend their Jamhuri Day celebrations. And one wonders, what example are you trying to set? Other leaders have come before who seemed to understand the importance of maintaining that, brotherhood, maintaining that proper brotherhood when it comes to regional relations and respecting one another, respecting, other communities. And not only does it come off as us being controlling and, displaying braggadocio, but it also really shows, it now paints us as a very petty nation. When we are interfering with affairs of other countries, and this will lead to consequences that we might not like in the long term. Because you've heard of Uganda, one case that you didn't mention from Uganda is the fact that some Kenyans were arrested on allegations of, I think, did they kill someone or something like that? You will find yourself in a situation where Kenyans will be treated with the same energy that our leader is treating the other leaders with, whereby you cannot be comfortable as a Kenyan to walk into Tanzania and actually just enjoy being a tourist in Tanzania. The other day I saw a friend of mine complaining online and saying that the manner in which, she's noticed that the manner in which Kenyans who are touring Tanzania are being treated in comparison to other people from the region is actually very different, you know. That hostility that we are displaying to other countries will be displayed to us as ordinary citizens when we are trying to visit these countries, when we are trying to do business with these countries. At the end of the day, not only is this regional unity important to us as a country, as a country generally, but also to us as individuals. The people who are doing business with Ugandans, what becomes of them if the government of Uganda decides to say today that, for example, we don't want to do business with you anymore. You know, they will be affected. There are people who are doing business in Tanzania. Kenyans who are doing, very many Kenyans are doing business in Tanzania. What if Tanzanians decide to say that, you know what, we actually can survive without you? What becomes of those businessmen and women? Okay,
and let's examine the way the Kenya Kwanza administration is carrying out its diplomacy, foreign relations. Over a period of about 1 year, 4 months, for the very first time, we can see some of these decisions being questioned, especially when it comes to some of the statements made by senior government officials with regard to issues happening outside our borders. The very first diplomatic gaffe happened on the very first day that President William Ruto was sworn in through a tweet about Western Sahara and whether or not Kenya is going to recognize that. After that, months later, we saw some cabinet secretary talking about what's happening in Sudan, in Khartoum, and another one talking about what's happening in DRC, about making disparaging remarks about the president of Rwanda. Now we are seeing that the cracks are developing with our immediate neighbors, Uganda and Tanzania, and DRC and the South Sudan have already recalled their ambassadors. And questions are now being raised. Is there a problem with our foreign policy?
Thanks, Fred. Overall, Kenya has good relations with the neighbors. That is the overall picture. I'm saying this because before I joined politics, I worked in more than 32 countries in Africa. And Kenya has a very good standing when it comes to regional issues. Conflicts are there and between countries. If you go to ECOWAS countries like Cameroon, Nigeria, Ghana, and Chad, that those misunderstandings which are there. If you come to East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania are triplets. Okay, and they are very, very close. However, despite this friendship, this tradition of friendship, there are bound to be challenges. Challenges like decisions being made which may not favor one country or the other. And you've seen this issue affecting the Kenya Airways. The Prime Minister, Cabinet Prime Minister coming out strongly and saying, look here, within 3 days, that issue is over. Because this is not the first time that is happening. You remember in 2020, Tanzania banned Kenya Airways, arising from Kenya banning the Tanzanian flights here. It is not new, but as countries coexist, there are bound to be a level of misunderstanding here and there. That is why there are diplomatic missions. That is why there is East Africa Community Parliament. Because why was this set up? In order to address those issues. And so we cannot just take the issue of Tanzania and these issues which are happening and say, look here, and then Kenya is the one which is aggressive. No. You remember when Magufuli was there, there was a time even Kenyan livestock will not enter Tanzania. But it was solved because of diplomatic approach. And therefore, when some of these issues come out, there are diplomatic missions, diplomatic ways to handle it. And I'm very, very sure that is happening. Finally, if you look at, for example, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and South Africa, there is up to now problems related to immigrants. And that has brought diplomatic issues in those countries. But they are being addressed because that is neighborhood. It is like in a family. Unless there are issues, it cannot be a family. There are supposed to be conflicts. And so the issues we are seeing about DRC, Rwanda, and Sudan, those are issues that really cannot make Kenya to be seen like we are a country which we are not relating well with neighbors. Those are diplomatic issues, and they are going to be solved.
Alex Modi, do you feel that probably we are misreading this, or we are reading too much into nothing?
We are reading too much into nothing. You'll notice that the East African Customs Union came into being, I think, in 2014. And the only country that does not really honor or implement that is Tanzania. And there's been a lot of conversation to make sure that they get it. If you go to Rwanda and Uganda and you do export, you do one custom entry. Southern Sudan came the other day, and because I do some export to Southern Sudan, they are working overtime to be able to do that. I hope you know that as a Kenyan, when you went to Tanzania 4, 5, 6 years ago, even today, if they identify you as a businessman, you have to pay a work permit, an immediate work permit. This is not a story, because one time I was going to Shinyanga, and I passed through Mwanza. As I came out of the customs, the question was, why are you here? I said, I'm coming to visit. Okay, who are you visiting? I mentioned the company that I'm going to visit. The customs officer picked the phone and called the company and asked, what is this guy coming to do? He's coming to see the factory. They told me, pay your permit. And because that comes on record, every time I went to Tanzania, I paid work permit. While we are in the same union, while we have the East African Community customs. So as countries, we have things that we are doing, and I think it's more of a diplomatic issue that needs to be sorted out. My reading of the situation that you're talking about right now is similar to the one that he alluded to, Air Tanzania in 2020. If you remember in 2021, 2022,
yes,
we also had an issue of the land vehicles, the tourist vehicles. I think there was a spat because the Tanzanian vehicles are not allowed to drop passengers at the Nairobi airport. And the idea was to reciprocate Tanzania, because we are not allowing Kenya vehicles to go into Tanzania to take tourism. You needed to go to the border and exchange into a Tanzanian vehicle. Kenya reciprocated that and became a big hula baloo, and Kenya had to back off and allow Tanzania to go ahead with the advantage, while Kenya did not have that advantage. The point is, these issues will always happen. And one of the things that we do as a country is to keep blaming someone for it. And blaming someone for something doesn't solve the issue. We have diplomatic issues, and there are sometimes real issues. For example, in Jamhuri Day, the president announced that people will come to Kenya from all over the world under the ETA, what do you call it? ETA, that replacement for visa, which was good. So you apply online, pay $35, and then you come in, no question asked. But the problem is, that has affected even the countries that have a memorandum of understanding where it was free entry. I had a group of visitors last week from South Africa, and when they came, one of them had come in December and it's free entry. So when they came and landed, nobody had told them anything. KQ did not give them any. He came with KQ. They came with KQ. Nobody gave them any brochures. So as soon as he landed and he went to the custom and handed his passport, you say you're supposed to apply for ETA. So he's asking, what is ETA? So they explained to him, step back. It took 1.5 hours for the system to accept his photo. So he was stuck at the airport for 2 hours. He was laughing the whole day because he didn't want to get annoyed. And what will happen is that there will be reciprocal from South Africa. South Africa will implement, I'm 100% sure they will implement back the visa, because you've ignored the memorandum of understanding. But like Banachikati says here, is that these are diplomatic issues that need to be sorted out.
Correct.
As a country, we need to rethink. We've had spats with everyone all the time. We are the big brother and the sibling rivalry, as usual. So everybody looks at you with, why are you doing this? What's the advantage to you as opposed to me? And that will continue until we are able to integrate as one community. Let's hope that in the future we'll be able to do that.
Are we anywhere closer towards that integration? Because now the general feeling is that we are getting more and more isolated, Bwana Karubia, that Kenya is looking, well, at least on social media, that we are on our own.
Fred, you realize actually Kenya is doing much towards the integration process. Allow me to disclose this. In fact, Kenya has 0 arrears in terms of state contribution towards EAC. I remember, in fact, President William Ruto, in the last Heads of State Summit, actually committed to pay double of what ordinarily is supposed to be paid by a nation. That is the height of commitments of Kenya towards the integration. Like my good brother Alex is talking about, when we look at the assessment of partner states towards complying with the set laws and policies of EAC integration, Kenya has least complaints towards compliances. Custom union, common market, and other statutory policies and laws towards achieving integration. So for me, I would say on matters of integration, Kenya is leading in terms of aligning resources and in terms of complying with set laws and policies.
Okay.
Maybe what I can say, and sorry to go to this side, people need to realize that the president that we have is a president who has networks even at the global level. People should not feel that he came maybe 2 years ago and he is addressing the international forums and he is becoming a darling of the global community. I think they need to tap into the network that he is creating at the global level so that as an EAC and as an African continent, people can benefit. I think the reason why I'm saying that is because of what my good sister said, that maybe the president is, when he goes into the international fora, he is speaking on behalf of Africa. But then when he is invited as an African leader. And he has been an African. He has all reason. Even myself, I can speak on behalf of Africa, and so is you, Fred, because you are a citizen of this continent.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I want to agree with Alex. Some of these things arise because the implementation is done before planning. Look at what is happening with the issues of free entry instead of visa. You look at a situation where there is implementation before planning. That is something which should, first of all, be tackled at the technical level, systems put in place.
Isn't that in itself a mishandling of our foreign relations? That there should have been planning.
But you can't blame that to the president. It is the technical teams. The president is not coming there to stamp what do you call it, passports. Okay. But once a policy has been issued, and then the technical teams need to work out. Okay, look at the diplomatic missions. What is the agreement between Kenya and South Africa? Kenya and Uganda, Kenya and which country? How will they end and how will they exit? All those things should be made. You see, a policy is passed. The implementers of the policies are the people we must hold accountable in this. So you look at a situation like what is happening in the airport, people coming, staying there for hours, waiting for stamps. Their names are not being reflected in the systems. Those are technical problems arising out of implementation before planning.
Ruth, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say something briefly. And my parting shot on this conversation is that I do genuinely feel that there's a little bit of some incompetence within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the diplomatic roles aside, we've seen a lot of times when there has been mistitling of, diplomats, there has been, basically misinformation about where the president has gone to and who he has met and what their title is, their designation. So, and these are mistakes, some small errors that, of course, within the diplomatic space are actually taken very seriously, When you're told, a particular embassy, we have a particular embassy instead of it being a consulate or a consulate, instead of there being an embassy. So I think there is a bit of some level of incompetence or lack of attention to detail within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that could also be attributable to some of these problems and challenges that we are having that needs to be resolved.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for
Fred,
that.
just a comment.
Yes.
But we must always remember, it's so easy to dump blame on someone, that these thieves have always been there. Always. We've had issues with DRC in the past. We've had issues with Uganda. We've had issues with Rwanda. We've had issues. The issue is that we must solve them one by one. And unfortunately in life, when you have a sibling who is doing better than the rest, he's always looked negative, even in our own families. If I'm the one who is doing best in the family, first of all, I get accused of being arrogant. Exactly what your question was. That guy is arrogant. Why? Because you drive in a V8 while everybody is driving in a Probox and others are walking.
A bicycle.
Yeah.
Now, do you buy all of them vehicles? The best families, you do that. So that will always happen. Okay. And I think one fact is true, that there's some level of lazy thinking in various areas. Like some of those issues, like the one I mentioned of ETA, is really not the policy. Is a fellas down there who refuse to think. Because if the president has said all people can come in, you must ask yourself, there are people who are coming free. Do you push them in that group? Common sense tells you no. So you have to create the same level of what I call, because in the past, you go to Uganda, it's free. So are you going to charge a Uganda $35? That would be, an nonsensical thing. So really is the whole implementation. And that's our problem, that there's a little bit of lazy thinking at different levels that makes our country look sometimes bad.
All right. I want us to go to our very last discussion, and this has to do with the push and pull between the executive and the judiciary. Yesterday, we saw Chief Justice Martha Koome, together with other members of the Judicial Service Commission, come out and speak as a JSC for the first time about this. She had already issued a statement as the head of the judiciary on this matter. And it is a big story on the front page of the Standard. I think others failed to capture. The Daily Nation did not even go with this. Only makes a very small mention of the same on the front page. We are ready for dialogue. CJ Koome now tells Ruto. But the headline on the Standard is different. CJ to Ruto, do not lead us to anarchy. Justice Martha Koome has warned the president and his allies that undermining the judiciary is an assault to democracy and will only take the country down the path of chaos and lawlessness. And she mentioned the word crisis.
Yes.
That this could lead to a constitutional crisis. You are a legal mind, Ruth.
Yes.
So this one, I'll start with you. We've seen lawyers come out to protest this, but the president has insisted and has even made directives that more or less go against some court orders issued against some of government projects. Do you agree with the CJ that this could lead us to a crisis?
Definitely, most definitely, this is going to lead us into a crisis. And a crisis for what reasons? For the reasons that the new constitution that it's old now. It's old enough to stop being called the new constitution. It's no longer new. But the current constitution that we enjoy, whose benefits we enjoy, came with a lot of changes. And one of those changes, or rather one of the emphases that were made within this constitution, was the whole issue of separation of powers. We were coming from a regime where there really was no separation of powers, that the president was the almighty. The president had the legislature in his pocket, he had the executive, he was the executive, and he had the judiciary at his hand. He had the powers to appoint members of the Judicial Service Commission. He had the powers to even fire judges. You'd receive a phone call and you'd be told your tenure has ended because you probably did not comply to what the president wanted you to do as a judge at that particular period of time. And therefore, separation of powers came as one of those measures that would in turn protect the citizenry from what we call anarchy, and in the literal sense from a dictatorship. Because a dictatorship is what happens when you have one individual or one arm of government playing all the roles and functions, one arm of the state playing all or two roles of functions within the state. That you have the president who directs parliament on what to do, which unfortunately seems to be the case, because I've said this before, that we've had legislators coming out and saying that in certain instances they've had situations where laws are brought to parliament bills are brought to parliament that have already been drafted without their participation, not forgetting that should be the role of the legislature, and then all they're told is that this bill has to be passed. Legislators themselves have come out. This is not an allegation that I am making as Ruth Ambogo. So there is already an interference with the powers of the legislature. Then you are the executive. As the president, you are the executive. Then you move now and say that you are going to deal with corruption within the judiciary, when there are already systems that have been established to deal with corruption within the judiciary. When we talk about separation of powers, what we mean, and separation of powers is a very old doctrine that came up in the days of the Aristotle days and the days of Montesquieu, where they were trying to protect the citizenry, as I said, from excess power of the state. So what would end up happening is that you are in a situation where the president has realized that some of the projects that he once implemented, even though out of goodwill, have not followed due process. Remember that the Constitution has very many laws, and among some of those laws are that before projects are implemented, there needs to be public participation and things like that. The president's main argument, and I listened to him, is that he's feeling frustrated that the housing project, which is a right within the Constitution, according to him, is being frustrated by the judiciary, which is not really the case, because when you look at the case that went before court, the case that went before court on the housing situation was a case that was decided on the merits, on the grounds that there was a bit of discrimination in how the law was structured, in the sense that the law was saying that salaried employees are the ones who will contribute to the housing levy, as opposed to everybody who is earning an income in the country. And therefore, the courts decided on the basis of law that that was indeed discriminatory. So when the president comes and says that, you know, he's politicizing this by saying that the courts are now denying Kenyans their rights to affordable housing, and because of that, there's corruption within the judiciary. We all know that the constitution that we gave ourselves, over and above the laws of separations of powers, prescribes the basis upon which judges and the judiciary should be subjected to checks and balances, systems and checks of balances within the judiciary, whereby if you're claiming as a citizen that, that for instance, there's corruption within the judiciary, there's a whole judicial service commission whose one of the duties and functions of is to investigate claims of, you know, abuse of power by judges, claims of corruption by judges, and there's a whole set of laws that have been put in place.
We've seen the JSC do that job.
We've seen the JSC do its job, and in fact, I was listening to the Chief Justice Martha Koome, and she was saying that last year alone, there were over 70 complaints that were brought up against judges, and there were about a number of them were dismissed, a number of them are still being investigated. There's a whole system of laws that has been put in place for you to investigate a judge that is corrupt. So I think that the president needs to stay. I don't even think the law prescribes that he needs to stay away from the judiciary, because what will end up happening is that, you know, as a president, there's some level of power that you exert. There's already that level of power that you do have. So when you go around making such statements, you intimidate the judiciary, you put them in a position where they're thinking, so must we comply to what the president says? Because we have seen in the past regimes where, measures have been taken against the judiciary for failing to comply to what the executive wants. Some of those measures have been austerity measures, for example, where you are told that we are now reducing the budget of the judiciary. Mm-hmm. But when you deeply do investigations, it is because the judiciary did not pass a certain law, or the judiciary went against, rather stifled a project or a program that the government was interested in implementing.
Okay. Let me look at Parliament and its role, because, fine, no one is mentioning the role of Parliament in this dispute between the executive and the judiciary.
Yes.
A lot of these things that are being challenged in courts as far as government projects and policies are concerned are probably issues that Parliament, if at all it played its role well, would have resolved. In as far as working on legislation. If at all the Houses of Parliament had scrutinized some of these projects and policies that were definitely brought to the Houses of Parliament and ensured that they were free of mistakes and loopholes that could be challenged in court, then we would not be having the problem we're having. But because Parliament, to some extent, ceded ground and felt that the best role they could play was simple rubber stamping of policies and laws or bills that are brought to the House by the executive. Hence, the executive finds itself fighting with the judiciary. Don't you think that Parliament should be blamed instead of the judiciary?
First of all, the judiciary and the executive should work harmoniously and yet independently. That should be the picture. That there should be liaison officers, both sides, looking at areas of conflict and mitigation towards the same. So they should work in a very good relationship. And to begin with, the president, from the word go, has had a goodwill towards the judiciary. You remember the first day he assumed office, he appointed judges to strengthen the judiciary. These judges had remained pending for a very long time. And so he made those appointments. Now, where the problem is, and we need to narrow down on this problem, is on the issue of two things. One is the universal health care, and two, the housing. That is where the problem is. It is a feeling of the executive that some people within the corridors of law are trying to use the judiciary to block government progress in terms of implementing some of the issues that have been captured in the manifesto of the Kenya Kwanza government. That has been a failing. The president has not attacked judges or the judiciary as an umbrella. He has singled out and said there are those cartels who are benefiting from NHIF and who do not want the universal health care program to continue. And so that is the way I understood it, and that is the way it is. And so coming to Parliament, Parliament has two units. It has the opposition and it has the MPs supporting government, okay? And these bills are passed through intensive debates. The current Parliament is not a rubber stamp. We debate bills, we bring those bills on the floor of the House, and there are heated debates on the floor of the House.
But
there are then
members of the legislature say that
yes.
we will not remove a comma or a full stop, we'll pass it as it is. Such comments mean that members of the legislature some of them simply just perform the function of a rubber stamp.
No, we look at them. We honestly look at the bills and then we pass them. But there are also the other bills which have not passed through. And which have not passed, and they stay. And so to say that we are rubber stamp is wrong. Number two, that the judiciary is an organization that we all find redress in. If Parliament has passed laws and these laws are not good, then we seek someone should seek redress in the judiciary. It does not mean Parliament is perfect. And therefore, when someone goes to the judiciary to seek redress, that is okay for them. But it does not mean that Parliament has not done its work. There are so many things that have gone to the judiciary for redress without having passed in Parliament, and nobody talks about them.
Okay.
Yes.
We've seen the Deputy President now bring up a personal issue and say that and it could be linked with this claim about government projects being hindered by the judiciary, but now he brought up a personal issue and said there's a judge that made an order against him personally and is now seeking to have that judge investigated. Don't you think that this could derail the discussion that the president was bringing up?
On 11th of June, 2022, all newspaper headlines, and you can check, had a headline saying that CJ Kome calls for the impeachment of President Uhuru Kenyatta for some issue. I think it was an issue of the fact that he had not appointed judges over the period that was there. And that was a very strong statement. In 2017, I think around November, after the election that was after the court situation, we remember President Uhuru Kenyatta calling judges unprintable words in a public rally. I think it was on Kamkunji. And then we have heard now President William Ruto say what he said against judiciary, and I hear the Member of Parliament trying to narrow down to this particular issue, but in his statement is the whole judiciary, really. In my view, Fred, is that we've learned political bad manners. That leaders don't, and I say this with a little bit of pain, don't think the implication of what they say. It's like when mtu amta, you become a leader, you still think like a mta person. So that when you're castigating the judiciary for a personal issue, what are you saying? That this country should be beholden of you because you're deputy president?
Yeah.
This country should be beholden you because you're the president? The Constitution gives Kenyans the power, the sovereign authority in this country. So you are there to serve us. So on one hand, you're claiming that the judiciary is derailing your project. On the other hand, the leader of majority in parliament is now saying, rolling out a plan to have public participation for that bill. Meaning there was no public participation before.
Yes.
Meaning the judge was right.
Yeah.
Meaning the members of parliament are rubber stamped because they didn't check that there was no public participation. Someone went to the judge and said, look, this 200 million shillings is money out of corruption. Okay? This matter must be heard, and these are the grounds for which we have brought him here. Could have been political reason, could have been whatever other reason, but the judge read what he was given, because the lawyer with us will tell you that a judge is supposed to be like Caesar's wife. She doesn't hear anything, she doesn't know anything except Caesar. She doesn't even go out to hear what you're saying. She doesn't read newspapers to use that as a means to make a decision. So at that point, what does she do? Like expected by law for which she serves. She says, hold this account. Because if you don't hold the account and the fella spends the money, there's no case. And after some time, the case was thrown out and the money was released to the man. After some time. You agree to the process that is there. So for me, it's something that we're used to as a country. We've made it normal that we can castigate anybody that we want to. But unfortunately for me, it's also the judges coming out. Because I think ideally the judges should not be political. They should sit back in the courtroom and wait for the cause. So let the politician go on, but do what you have to do. JSC was right yesterday, because that's a kind of a board of directors. And in fact, during the Constitution, some of us who participated in the technical committees were asking that we protect the Chief Justice by not becoming the president of JSC. He's already the president of the courts and all that. But we were insisting that the Chief Justice in the Constitution should not be the chair of JSC. Let an independent body like any other organization have a chair that when the chair speaks, is not the CJ. You know, now we are seeing is Kome.
You would have preferred a different voice to speak?
We presented that very strongly. That you needed an independent person to run that JSC as a chairman so that he can be able to be independent of this. Now, we will not be saying CJ told Ruto. We'll be saying now JSC told him. Okay. That we can be able to have a conversation together. Okay. So for me, we've created a political bad manners, allow me to use that word, on national TV. And that is what is happening, that we can actually be able to comment on anything. My urge is to leadership that once you become a leader, you got to weigh your words before you speak. So that when you're dealing with a national issue, please don't bring your personal issue into it.
Yes. Bwana Karobia, I'm sure you've dealt with the judiciary at some point in your life. And what the JSC pointed out yesterday is that there are definitely laid out procedures for review and amendment and for redress if at all you have any complaint against the judiciary. We've seen, case in point, even the former governor of Nairobi take a case to the JSC which was very much publicized, and that case was concluded and that judge was eventually kicked out of the judiciary. Why is it so hard? Why do you feel that this administration is reluctant to follow through with that kind of process?
I think from where this administration is coming from, you understand that they have every project that this administration is trying to put forward is injected with a court order or a stay something. Some injunctions from the court. So I think it reads a lot of frustrations from the judiciary. But as Mheshimiwa Chikati has said, it is important that the three arms of government have liaison officers, frequent exchange of ideas of how we run the country, because at the end of the day, we might be so much be absorbed to the power that we have been vested by the Constitution and other national documents. But people need to realize that the greater legacy is when the president serves on his manifesto that he was elected on, when the CJ serves on her mandate as the leader of the judiciary, when the speakers of the National Assembly, the Senate, fulfill their legislative role. So I think there is need for, because they are the leaders of our country from their respective arms of government, there is need for frequent exchange of ideas, there is need for frequent meetings so that people can get to understand.
Do you agree, for instance, that if the National Assembly had played its role properly, that some of these issues being challenged in courts would not have existed? That some of these problems that the president is frustrated about should be blamed directly on failure by the National Assembly to do its proper role?
Mm-hmm. Really, I wouldn't go to that route because the Assembly also maybe had its own relationship with the executive in regards to meeting certain priorities at a certain particular time. But at the same time, I call upon the judiciary, also when they are making rulings or judgments and whatever, to look at the greater interest of the people, because it is actually a constitutional right for somebody to have a shelter. Mm-hmm. So, and what the president is seeking to achieve, and I think that's why also he liaised even with the National Assembly, is to ensure that he fulfills this particular constitutional right of citizens having a place they can call home. And that's the greater priority or objective of this affordable housing project.
I just want to...
As you make your final comments,
yes,
because
I just want to kind of clear this. If the leader of majority has come back and is doing public participation, then my colleague is wrong.
Yeah.
They didn't do their work,
yeah.
Period. You remember the other issue that was also put on hold, the CAS
yes.
appointment.
Yes.
There's a requirement by the Constitution for public participation. Why does the president think that he can do those things without what the Constitution requires? Ask us whether we want to do those houses. Mm-hmm. And one of the worst thing that has happened right now, because I think if it's not people who will be handpicked, people will throw away that bill. Because this week, we've had a very interesting situation. Houses in Nakuru have been advertised by the government. The cost of a 3-bedroom house is 4.2 million shillings a flat. At the same time, Great Wall in Mlolongo, where land is more expensive, commercial have announced that a 3-bedroom house is 3.5 million, meaning the difference between the two is 700,000 shillings. This is a commercial entity. They bought land, they borrowed money, they are making huge profit. They're able to sell the house 700,000 shillings cheaper than the government. That is questioning why. Okay. So an employee is deducted 1.75, and we call that as a levy. How do I get it back? Why should I sponsor everybody else's houses?
Okay.
And only 3 million Kenyans are employed, for information. So housing 57 million? I think it's important for us to come to the reality that truth must be spoken.
Okay.
If somebody is wrong, they are wrong. Okay. We don't have to support someone just for the sake of supporting them.
Thank you, Bwana Mwathi. And I'll give you about a minute because we're really out of time. Just a minute for your final comments for this, Bwana Chikati.
Thank you so much. As I said before, courts of law are where everybody should find redress. And when a court passes a ruling and makes a ruling that please go back to public participation, it does not necessarily mean that the parliament made a mistake. Okay? Because as we move ahead, we must have someone who says, look, although this one was passed, but then it's not good. So you cannot use that to blame government and say we did not do our work. And this is not the first time. There have been so many motions passed by parliament into bills, and they have ended up in the judiciary, in the courts of law. This is not the first time. That means that everyone in Kenya who finds that is unsatisfied with the decision made by parliament, he can seek redress. And that is what is happening. And we're just following what the court has said.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Ruth?
I think Kenyans need to be very much aware of the misinformation that they're about to receive for the remaining years of this term. given a president whose appetite for addressing people is very high, he will be the #1 leading misinformer of Kenyans as to what is happening, as to the systems. So Kenyans really need to pay attention and separate what is right from what is wrong. As it stands right now, the president has publicly addressed people and lied to them about what the judiciary has done regarding the housing levy. So I think moving forward, we must be vigilant enough to know, to separate misinformation from facts.
Okay, thank you so much, Ruth. Ruth Ambogo, lawyer and governance expert. John Chikati, MP Tongaren, also the Secretary General, Ford Kenya Party. Alex Mwathi, political analyst, and Maina Karobia, MP, East Africa Legislative Assembly. Our panelists this morning, helping us understand issues that affect this country. The tiff between Kenya and Tanzania over KQ's flights to Dar es Salaam and reciprocity dispute, matters to do with education and the funding model, as well as the push and pull between the executive and the judiciary. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your very well-considered opinions on this matter. And as we wrap up this session, let me go through this editorial comment on some other story that has been making headlines as well. Now, in the span of just 2 weeks into the new year, our communities have been shaken by the tragic murders of 2 young women, both victims of what seemed to be romantic encounters gone awry. These incidents have not only left families shattered, but have also ignited a fervent debate on social media regarding responsibility and blame. It is essential to emphasize from the outset that there is absolutely no excuse for such heinous crimes, and those responsible must be brought to justice. However, amid the discussion surrounding culpability, there is a critical need for a broader conversation about personal safety. While it is true that we demand the government's commitment to ensuring the safety of all citizens, we must recognize that we live in a world where criminals still roam our streets. The unfortunate reality is that individuals with malicious intent exist, and it is our responsibility to prioritize our own security, especially in an era dominated by casual online dating and social media connections. The misplaced debate over the victim's actions should not overshadow the urgency of addressing the larger issue at hand. Rather than assigning blame to the victims, it is time to collectively take control of our own security. This means being vigilant and proactive when interacting with strangers, whether in person or online. As a society, we need to cultivate a culture of self-awareness and personal responsibility. This involves being cautious